The victims killed in the shooting at the Capital Gazette newspaper in Maryland are being remembered. Assistant Managing Editor Rob Hyacinth and 4 of his colleagues died in the newsroom on Thursday. Tonight, family and friends will come together to remember Rob and honor his legacy. And joining us now is his wife, Maria Hyacinth. Maria, thank you so much for being here. We can only imagine what these past 4 days have been like for you and your kids and your family. Tell us how you are today and how you're preparing for the memorial service tonight.
Wow. I'm going to speak of fundamental, the weather. We needed it not to rain, but we would have loved for it to be cooler. And just having heard your weather person talk, I couldn't help but remark on that. But it does take me back to preparing for my wedding, oddly, in the backyard at my mom's house in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1985. It was hot. I claim it was only 85. Others are telling me it was warmer. But Rob wisely said then, tell folks to bring their shorts, because after the magistrate, you know, the equivalent of a justice of the peace, marries us, we're going to adjourn to another zone of the yard and break out the shorts and the Frisbees, listen to some jazz, and drink some beer and celebrate. Oysters on the half shell, and we just want people to be comfortable. That was my husband. So I have said that line and meant different things by it today. We want people to be comfortable as for their physical well-being, of course, in this heat, but we want people to be comfortable to share what they recall. And we're just trying to remember what makes us feel good and celebrate that.
And in fact, I read that that you are saying that you're telling people that again, that Rob would never want people to have to put on a suit for him. And so you're saying that the attire is summer casual and that shorts are welcome tonight. Correct. In fact, my mom was just confirming that. She's here from North Carolina. And the family from Florida, we reiterated it to them last night. So it will be a casual affair, a celebration, if you will, of Rob's life, which, you know, when you're sitting here in the sunshine, even though it's muggy, and these beautiful flowers that he and I just had installed this spring, it's easy to say, I guess, that it's beautiful and this will be so refreshing, and it will, but it takes an awful lot to remove the memory of signing a death certificate or the forms to get a death certificate, and the hell that my children and I had to go through yesterday. So we're trying, and I want to thank Barb Hyacinth for reminding me. One day at a time, there's a reason for cliches. So we're trying to live in this moment and celebrate the great stories of Rob Hyacinth, some that he wrote that are worth just reminding people of, and some of the poignant moments. We shared a couple here, and a lot of reporters in this family, or former reporters in some cases, but we sat around dwindled to a small group of, I'll say, 10 at 1 hour last night, and Rob's nephew, Scott, shared just a classic, real sensitive story. And can you tell us what that was?
As a former co-worker of Rob's, a great writer named Ron Hayes. Back in the 80s, when Rob was doing a story on David Acker, the dentist in South Florida that apparently revealed that, yes, or confirmed AIDS could be transmitted via a dentist, the Kimberly Bergalis case. Rob found himself in need of going to a gay bar to try to find if this dentist had associated with other gay men. And he walked around and around and around the block a few times, and he just couldn't quite do it. And he comes back and he talks to Ron. And as Ron Hayes could tell this story like no other, by the way, Ron is a gay man. And Rob said, well, I just have to tell you that I've just walked around this gay bar 3 times, and I'm trying to develop the nerve to go in, and I feel bad about myself that this is a thing. And Ron just looked at him and said, "Don't worry. First time I went in a gay bar, I felt nervous too." So they're just, with journalists, there are always stories, and that says so much about Ron Hayes and his gentility.
Yeah.
And it says so much about Rob feeling guilty about that. And again, what I've said maybe too many times, but it's the humanity of us all that is what is important. And that's what lovers of poetry and words, who can still be pragmatic and great intellects, that's what they show.
And that's what Rob, I know, did love. I mean, he was a lover of words, and I've heard you describe him as that. Every single thing that I've heard from colleagues of his, everything I've read, he was just a very special person. He was a special person, and he mentored people and everything. I mean, everything. I understand why it's hard for you to narrow it down to an anecdote, but I want to read something that his paper put out yesterday in terms of their editorial. Because I think that it's really important about where journalism is right now and how journalists do feel under siege. Not necessarily every day in the newsroom, but there is a feeling of unease. And here's what the paper, the Capital Gazette editorial board wrote. No, we won't forget being called an enemy of the people. No, we won't forget that. Because exposing evil, shining light on wrongs, and fighting injustice is what we do. And Maria, I'm just wondering, I mean, did Rob talk about ever feeling threatened lately in this climate as a journalist?
Well, he would, but usually I'd be the one bringing it up because, of course, I was worried about him. And you can envision that after the terrible school shooting in the spring in South Florida, he'd bring it up on my behalf. Are you safe in a school? So it just makes me think of two things about Rob. He of course was attuned to what was going on in his profession and the threat to journalism. He cared about those principles. He's a man who believed in voting. We had a primary in Maryland. We've got to read up. We've got to go together. Then I'll go in late for the election coverage. So he was a civic-minded person, a man who believed in the press, and yet a human being. And I think that's what made him the great editor that he was. He understood that's a human being who composed these words that might suck a little, need a little help right now. That's a human being I'm on the phone with, and I'm pestering a third time today to see if they'll do something that the reporter forgot to ask about, and I'm sending them back out. As you know, people in small shops have to do all kinds of chores. So, yeah, he did talk about journalism, but it didn't consume him the way you might have envisioned. But he cared about people, and he stood on his integrity. I mean, he just said, I try my best to be a man of character. I chose this profession because I believe that it, too, is a profession of character. It serves a function in our democracy. And we are blessed with a piece of property with woods and tranquility, and we could wax poetic about things like, is that a bluebird or whatnot, or we could talk about the ethics of should I drive your car even though you've got a Barack Obama sticker on it in 2008 and I have to borrow yours. I mean, he worried about things like that, but he was a man of principles, and that is journalism. I mean, those of us who I'm a former journalist, let me confess, and an English teacher now. But those who go into journalism, if they're doing it for the right reasons, and I think most of them are doing it because they want to uncover the truth. It's impossible to get the absolute truth. It's impossible to understand everything. Lord knows I know that today. But that's the goal, to put out as close as you can the truth. And Rob Hyacin, every Hyacin who's ever been a journalist, every Hyacin knows that. And I wish everybody understood that is the way it works. Sometimes the news is good, sometimes it's not. We're just trying to be truthful and correct, as I've said before, when we're not right the first time.
Well, those are the tenets of journalism, you're right. And it is always a good reminder that these are real stories about real people with real families and real children, and they're not just statistics. And That's what we try to keep in mind every day when we report these stories. Maria, thank you for sharing a part of Rob with us and for sharing your family's story. And obviously, we'll be watching as you celebrate Rob's life tonight. Thank you very much for being with us.
Okay. Thank you.